Hello guys and welcome back to another video. I'm very excited to bring this one to you today because I actually had a load of people say they really wanted to see this after the last one that I posted. So I thought I would do my interview questions, interview tips, all good stuff involving interviewing with camps, and it is something that can seem really intimidating and something that I remember when I first interviewed with my camp 7 years ago. I was terrified, and it's so normal to feel nervous in any interview aspect, it really is. But the one thing I always try and remind people with interviewing with camps is that it's more just to get to know you chat. That camp has offered you an interview based on your application that you've sent over, maybe based on a video they've seen of you. So there is a reason they want to speak with you and they want to interview with you. So make sure you bear that in mind, that it is also just as much of an interview for you as it is them. Like, you're interviewing that camp the same way that they're interviewing you. I always remind people of that because it's so important to remember that it's not just about you being questioned. You are going to get asked questions, obviously, but when you then get the chance to ask questions back, please do, and think about different types of questions you can ask. Think about different things that are going to make you stand out from others. But it is just as much you finding out about that camp to make sure it's where you want to spend your summer as well. It can happen that you can interview with a camp that you thought was going to be your dream camp and you would only want to go there, and you might speak to that director or whoever's interviewing you and actually be like, like a few of these things that they said actually isn't exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. So it really teaches you to know what camp you want. And I always say try and interview with as many places as you possibly can, because it's the only way you're going to know what camp is going to feel right for you. And you have to speak to those directors, you have to speak to different camps and get a feel for everything. Ask about their policies, ask about big events, ask about time off, because it's all stuff that will factor into you wanting to go to that camp or not. So yeah, I thought I would just run through some of the interview questions that I personally ask when interviewing for Tyler Hill, and also some other ones, like just generic things that you'll be asked. It's very similar to what you put on your application. Like, a lot of what you'll speak about in person during an interview is going to be what you've already put on your application as well anyway. So kind of going off what I said at the start, obviously, like I said, that camp is offering you an interview based on the fact that they've seen your application and they really like the look of it and they want to interview with you. Please make sure you go into as much detail and go and talk about all the relevant things that you did in your application. If you went into so much detail about your experience working with kids or your favourite hobbies or just like your personality, please make sure you show that same passion and excitement actually in an interview as well, because that's what they've gone from at the moment. The application is all they've seen of you. The application is all they have to go off. So when you actually get the opportunity to interview, give it your all and go into just as much detail, or even more detail if you can, than you did in your application. It goes back to what I said about in my application tips, like, show that you're excited, please. It is the biggest thing that I look for when I'm interviewing with people, is someone that seems smiley and engaged and enthusiastic and just excited to be talking about camp. And that is the biggest thing, because you can have someone that has no experience working with kids or very little experience working with kids, could be 18, 19 years old, but has that genuine excitement and enthusiasm, which is something you can't teach someone to have. You could then have someone that is 25 years old, that's taught in primary schools, that has coached sports, that has so much experience working with kids, but just can't get that excitement across. Now, we can help teach someone to work in an environment at camp in and around kids and give them the tools that they need to succeed at camp, but the excitement is huge and it's something that you can't physically teach someone to do. You either have it or you don't. So please try and show it and just get it across as much as possible. Yeah, okay, so like I said, I'm going to talk through some interview questions and just give you an idea on some things that you might be asked. Like I said, a lot of it is literally taken from the application. So a big question you'll be asked about is explain about your experience working with kids, your childcare experience, go into a bit of detail about that. And exactly that, please go into that detail. Even if you haven't got tons of experience, think back to things that you may have done, whether it was in school or sixth form or uni, like little things that you might have done, babysitting, any volunteering you might have done. It's all relevant and more. It's just like, if you can talk about a little bit more, even if it's not incredible childcare experience, it just shows that you're really trying to push across that you have worked with kids before. It might not be really extensive experience, but you want to have this opportunity to build on that experience. And maybe you can say that in the 9 months we now have until we go to camp, 8 months, 9 months, I don't know how long it is, you are going to try and get some experience volunteering, whether that's at sports clubs or schools or like brownies, guides, that kind of thing. Like, really just showcase that experience, because at the end of the day, this is what this experience is about. That is probably one of the most important questions you'll be asked, is about your experience working with kids, because that's where this all stems from. You are going to work at a camp to be around kids, so you've really got to show that that is what you are excited to do. That's what you have your passion to do, because That's the priority here. Okay, next up is hobbies. You might be asked, what are some of your hobbies outside of your work life, study life, school, uni? So think about some things that you enjoy doing, and this should be a really natural question to talk about, and it should come quite easily to you, whether that's like you like to read, or you like to bake, you like to do sports, go swimming, go to the gym, hang out with friends. Like, that should be quite a natural question to talk about. But again, go into as much detail as you can. When I ask people this question, I love hearing what people's hobbies are, and I love when someone has so many different hobbies and so many things that they like to do, and even if they have a busy life, it's like, oh well, I try to squeeze in as much of these things as possible. It's just so nice to hear what people get up to in their spare time, and it really helps you get to know someone a little bit better, to kind of see what they like to do when they're not at work or at school. Okay, next up, a big question you will be asked is, why that camp? Why do you want to work there? This one can be quite tricky to answer, and I really think this is where your research is going to stem from. This is where it's going to really help if you've done a lot of research beforehand, if you've researched into their website, obviously trying to have a look through their social media, see if anyone else has posted that went to that camp as a counsellor, and try and just gauge a vibe. And it's always a hard question, and I can't really give much direction on what to say for this question because every camp is so different. But for me, if I was asked why Tyler Hill, why do I want to go to Tyler Hill, why would I want to work there? I think for me, I would say that the positive feel that I get from the website, from socials, and from what other people have said about it, and the community feel, the way everyone looks like they're part of one big family, and the kids look really well taken care of, and everyone just looks like they're having a really fun, happy time. And I think more you want to start, I think you definitely want to talk about it on a deeper side before you start talking about the facilities and the activities they offer, which is all an amazing part of that question. It's definitely going to be key in why that camp has caught your eye, but definitely try and dig a little bit deeper. Try and talk about the fact that that camp might have some values. For example, we have starfish values, so I would definitely say, from researching your website, I saw that you have these amazing values and they really align with a lot of the things that I believe. And just put your own spin on it, and obviously try and research and do, like I say, a deep dive, and think of something to say that maybe that interviewer hasn't heard before about that camp, because it's very easy to go down the route of the facilities are amazing, you offer so many activities, and that's great, that's an amazing part of it, but try and think a little bit deeper. And again, always make sure it relates back to the fact that you really want to work with kids. You can maybe see yourself at that camp. You really want to have the opportunity to give back to that camp as much as you can tell that it gives to other people, and the impact you want to have when you're there, and just the exciting energy that you want to bring to that camp, and that you can really tell is there. It is a hard question, but try and think outside the box for that one. Okay, next up is that you're probably going to be asked what kind of age range you think you would like to work at in a camp setting, what kind of age division wise you can see yourself really thriving in at camp. And again, this is going to be completely different for everyone. Please go into a bit of detail with it. Try not to just say, oh, the 9-year-olds. Try and say, oh, I'd really like to work with the 9-year-olds because based on my past experience working with kids, I've really thrived working with that age. I am very open-minded though. One thing I always try and tell people when we speak about this question is that having an open mind when it comes down to what age you want to work with is key, because at the end of the day, the 9-year-olds you've worked with in a home setting are not going to be the same as the 9-year-olds that you work with at camp at all. Completely different. And that's something to bear in mind, is that when you get to camp and they try and place you in divisions, it's obviously a very hard task to place hundreds of people in the right divisions, the one that they want to be in. We want to keep people as happy as possible, but also we want to see them thrive, and we want to see the kids be at their happiest. And sometimes it might be that you're giving off a different energy that might work with the 12-year-olds instead of those 9-year-olds. And having an open mind is really, really key, and just I think understanding that camp are going to put you where they see you working best. And I'll always use this example of my best friend Meg, who went to camp in 2022, dead set on wanting to work with the freshmen. The freshmen are our youngest campers, 7 years old, never been to camp before, and she wanted to be with them. And she sat down, had a conversation with the girls' head counsellors, and they just said, look, we completely appreciate and respect the fact that you want to work with this group of kids, but we can really, really see you thriving with our oldest girls, our upper camp, we can really see you working well with them. And Meg was like, no, not a chance. She was like, I don't see myself working well there. And it's intimidating thinking about working with the oldest kids, especially when you could be going into camp in early 20s and some of those kids are 16, 17 years old. So it can be weird, but she went back and forth for a little bit and eventually was like, no, you know what? They think I'm going to work well here. they obviously must have a reason for it, so I'm going to go for it. And she did. She worked with the teens and had the most incredible time and wouldn't have changed a thing about it, and then went back for a second summer and worked with the CITs, who are the oldest campers, and she had the best time. So sometimes you do have to just be like, right, I know I want this, but this is kind of where they think they can see me best, so I'm going to go for it. So yeah, definitely still have an idea of an age range. I think it's always good to be able to say for this question, like, oh, based on my experience, this is where I'm thinking, and then go from there. It's always good to ask around this question as well, like, oh, what are your age ranges? Like, what are your divisions? Like, how do they work? Because at my camp, they are completely different to another camp, and we have different names for different ages, and you won't remember all of them. Like, if you ask this question, you're probably not going to retain any of that knowledge, but it's fine. But it's also a really nice question to ask, and kind of, again, it's showing that more of an interest to be like, oh, like, well, what are your oldest campers called? Like, what is their division name? Or what are the youngest campers? It just gives you a little bit more insight on how that camp is run. Okay, and the next question is all about your job role, and again, this is going to stem from exactly what you put on your application, and make sure you talk about the same things that you put on your application. I cannot stress this enough, that don't just out of nowhere say, oh yeah, right, actually I was thinking I might work like in basketball, but you've not mentioned that in your application. You can definitely add it on, but please make sure you talk about the ones that you have put in your application first. That is really, really key. So if you want to work as a general counsellor, maybe you've got some dance experience, talk about those first, and then say, but actually I then was looking on your website doing some research and realised that you offer basketball, you have a big basketball program. Now, I haven't taught basketball, but I had a real passion for it growing up, that kind of thing. You get the drift. But yeah, please make sure it's relevant, and please make sure it's not like, oh, look, this wasn't mentioned in an application, if that makes sense. So please make sure you talk about the job roles you've spoke about, but also make sure when you are applying and interviewing that they are actually roles you want to teach at camp. Please don't put something down in your application that is just a passion when you're asked about job roles. Yes, you can put that in when you're asked about hobbies and things you like to do, but when you're asked about what job role you want to do at camp, please keep it relevant so that you can see yourself and you would actually be comfortable teaching that and working in that area at camp. Please don't put down tennis as an option for a job role just because you enjoy tennis and you've done tennis growing up, but you don't actually feel comfortable enough to teach it at camp. So yeah, a few things to bear in mind. Keep it relevant. Make sure it's something you actually want to do, and it also means you've got more to talk about then if it is genuinely something you have a passion about and genuinely something you want to do at camp and you can see yourself thriving doing and you can see yourself bringing a lot to that program. That's where you'll talk about all of that. Okay, next up is your scenario based questions, and this is something to definitely be prepared for because scenario questions are great for interviews and really great to get an insight on just how you would handle that situation. So a few topics to think about that are really good and obviously are in and around camp all the time, are things that you will come across all the time at camp. I will do a separate video on this talking about kind of like how to handle tricky situations. I started this as like a series I wanted to do last year and then just kind of like fell off the wagon with it and I didn't see it through as much as I wanted to. But a few kind of scenario based questions to think about is like homesickness. How would you help a homesick camper that is missing home, is really upset? How would you help them get through something like that? Another one that's really good is like, how would you help a camper that is really struggling to find something to eat in the dining hall, that doesn't know what they want to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner and is just not eating as much as they should be? Think about that. That's a really good one and something that obviously that can come up a lot at camp. Another one could be, how would you get a camper to an activity that really doesn't want to go there? Again, something that happens all the time, especially as the kids get a little bit older and it can take them a little bit longer to get out of the bunk. Think about things you can do there. Another one could be, how would you handle a camper that isn't behaving well? How would you act in that situation? What would you do there? So yeah, they're just a few different scenarios, a few different things to think about. You could be asked something completely different. You might not get asked a scenario question, but it's always good to have those in your back pocket. And it's always good to kind of think about those things now anyway, because some of those scenarios you will never have come across in like a normal setting, even if you work with kids all the time. I remember going to camp my first year. I had done a lot of I had a lot of experience working with kids before I went to camp. Like, I'd coached gymnastics full time. I'd done like working in schools and different things. So I thought I was very well prepared for it, but nothing can fully prepare you for camp until you get there. And some things are so different than how they would ever be. Obviously, I'd never been in an environment where I was living with the same group of kids for 7 weeks straight and like being around them all the time and getting them up in the morning, taking them to meals and activities and then making sure that they were ready for bed, and like everything was just running smoothly. And nothing in life will really prepare you for that, because it is such a different environment and one that it does take a while to get used to. So it's definitely good to have a few things in your mind about how to handle those kind of situations. You will go through a lot of it during orientation. You will do a lot of workshops, a lot of things about how to handle a camper that is feeling homesick, or how to help a camper that isn't eating loads at mealtime. So you will go through a lot of that, but it's always nice to have a little think. And like I said, I will do a little series again talking about a few different things, like tricky situations and ways to handle them, ways that I've handled them. But again, always remember that no two things are ever going to work at camp. Like you might have a homesick camper that even on 2 separate days might act completely differently and like need support differently. So yeah, something nice to just have a little think about though. But yeah, I will definitely do some of those videos. Okay, the last question I'm going to talk about is just something that I think is a really nice question to ask, and it's really nice to see how people respond. And it's just kind of like, what are you hoping to bring to camp? What are some things that really motivate you and really excite you about this whole process? And this is a question where you can really go into a lot of detail, because you can go down a lot of different avenues with this, and it's, like I say, really nice to hear what is exciting people about it and how excited they are to work with kids and have this incredible opportunity working away from home and living in an environment that is so different and being around so many people from all over the world, and just the impact that you can have on camp. And again, something that is going to be so unique to everyone, but something to have a think about. And also, even not in an interview setting, but it's nice to think about that anyway, like what you really want to bring to camp and how you want to impact your campers and your co-counselors and what you want to bring to this experience, because camp is the quickest 7 weeks of your entire life. It will go by in the blink of an eye. So I definitely recommend having a think about that, because it's nice to go into the summer knowing what you want out of this experience. Okay, I'm going to round that video off here. I hope that's been helpful and given you a little bit of an indication on a few interview questions. Again, please don't take this as gospel. You could be asked completely different questions, but it's always nice to have thought about these kind of questions, because you can always go down a different route when you're asked different ones, knowing this is like a good base. But this is a good foundation, is what I'm trying to say. It's a good place to start and have a little think about. Definitely do some research and prep for your interviews. Like, it's always good to have like some stuff written down. Oh my God, I forgot my most important point. Questions. Please ask questions, guys. I cannot stress this enough, that asking questions is huge and is going to be such, for me anyway, when someone asks a couple of questions at the end of an interview, I just personally like that I'm then able to give a bit of insight on camp, because like I said, that you're interviewing that camp just as much as they're interviewing you. And if you finish that interview having not asked any questions at all, you haven't done that. That camp has just interviewed you, and that is that. You need to ask questions to get a vibe from that camp. You need to ask questions to know certain things. And you could even say, oh, actually, I did have a couple of questions, but you actually covered them when you spoke about this. So thank you for that, but I think I'm all right for now. Like, that's fine to say, as long as you always relate it back to the fact that you did have questions, that you had written some down, you had some thoughts about what you wanted to ask. And it could honestly be anything. It could be like, oh, like we said earlier, can you run through the different division ages at your camp? Like, how does it work? What are the different names for divisions? You could ask about different event days, how that works. If you've seen something like values or things that camp stands for on their website, ask about that. Say, oh, like, I've seen that you have this starfish program that we have at Tyler Hill. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, how does that work? And just really try to dive a little bit deeper and just extend that interview as well. Like, make it longer. It's similar to an application, like I said before, that the amount of time that is spent on that application or interview, the more time that's spent on it will, like, you've got more of a chance of you going to the next stage, of it being, of you getting offered a second interview, of you getting offered a position at that camp. The longer you spend talking with someone, the more you get to know them, and the more likely you are to be like, oh, actually, this was really, really nice. Like, I want them to speak to the next interviewer and like get to know them a little bit better, or I think they're amazing. Like, we're going to offer them a position. So yeah, make the interview as long as you possibly can. Like, that time is for you, and that time has been allotted there, whether it's 30, 40 minutes, an hour, that time has been put aside for you. And if you end the call after 20 minutes, then that's just you done. So like, make it as long as you possibly can, which stems from going into detail through your questions and also asking questions at the end. That is key. Okay, now I think I'm finished. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any other video ideas that you want to see that are camp related, travel related, Australia related, please let me know. I have all my vlogs still to come. They're all edited and literally ready to go. I think I've got one more like camp video, like my Las Bowl vlog, and then all my travel vlogs start. And then I've been doing some vlogging out in Australia, which has been really nice. But yeah, I thought it'd be nice to kind of have a few of these like more info chatty videos in and along my like vlogs as well, instead of just posting all the vlogs at once and then having all of these. I think it's nice to go in between. Let me know. I don't know if anyone even likes that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.